Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Total Biscuit. I've been sitting on this Max footage from Planetside 2 for a little while due to an exclusive from another site. Now I can finally show you some Max content. What, pray tell, is the MAX? The MAX is the Mechanized Assault Exosuit. It is the heaviest piece of man-portable armor plating that you can get. It essentially turns you into a mech with two weapons, one mounted to each arm that can be independently fired. Unlike in Planetside 1, where you had two of the same weapon, you can now change things around, as you can see here. Here are a few options that are currently in development, including the Bro Gun. Needless to say, this is all for testing purposes. Now, in Planetside 1, you were limited by three different types of MAX. There was an anti-vehicle, there was an anti-infantry, and there was an anti-air. Funnily enough, they all use the weapons I was just pointing at there, but there are now different variants of the weapons and additional weapons, including a flamethrower. The flamethrower was something that a lot of Planetside players wanted for the longest time. I believe it was actually in the alpha of Planetside 1, but they had to take it out and it never came back. The flamethrower can now be mounted onto a MAX unit. The weapon types varied on a faction-by-faction basis, as did the look of the MAX. Now, in Planetside 2, you can also customize the MAX in a similar way to the infantry, both in terms of its loadouts and in terms of customization. So here's some very basic customization options we've got here. This is for cosmetic purposes. I can put horns on my Max. I can change my Max's camo. That makes me look like my Max is covered in bacon. I decide not to choose the Bacon Max. Although, actually, I think I would quite like the Bacon Max to be a feature of the game. Hell, if End of Nations can do it, and yes, they have, then Planetside 2 can as well. So as you can see, you can still very clearly tell it's a Terran Max, but this one is customized with camo and horns on the helmet. It looks rather badass, don't you think? Each of the different factions has a different looking Max unit. I can also show you very much a work-in-progress version of the Vanu Max. That is not complete yet. The animation set is completely wrong because it's still using the animation set from the Terran Max. So please bear that in mind when you see it because it will look silly. Very, very silly. Now I'm going to drop my Max in by spawning it on top of somebody else. You'll see that it comes in via a drop pod. Once again, animations on this are not complete. It's an alpha! Of course it's an alpha. What else could it be? Now I'll just use a quick admin command to get it to spawn properly, and there we go. This is my custom variant of a TR Max. Now this thing can sprint forward, as you can see. It's not very mobile, it's a big fat target, but it is the toughest armor that you can wield. You'll notice here that I have a heavy dual cycler on my right arm and a flamethrower on the left. Both of these also incomplete. I don't even have to mention this to you anymore. You're smart enough to know that this is very much alpha stuff. Now, those of you who played Planetside 1 will be aware that the Terran Max had a unique ability, as did every Max. The Terran Max could lock down, which would increase its fire rate, but would decrease its ability to turn and move, which kind of made it the worst Max because you got shot as you are a big, fat, stationary target. Now, lockdown will be in the game here, but you'll notice that I actually activated a shield. This was the new Conglomerate Max ability. A lot of these abilities are now going to be available regardless of which faction you are, but they're going to add new faction-specific abilities, so you don't have to have the same one. If you don't want a Terran Max with lockdown, you don't have to take a Terran Max with lockdown. Now, as much as I would like to capture this, I cannot do so because I'm in a Max unit. As you can see, these are not exactly designed for delicate hacking. You're not going to get very far like that. Also, in a Max suit, the vast majority of vehicles cannot support you because you are too fat. You can fit in a Sunderer, you can fit in one of the two Max spots in the galaxy, but don't expect to get onto a bike or into a tank or anything along those lines. That's one of the biggest trade-offs of choosing a Max unit, and there are only certain times when you'll really want to use a Max. Maxes are extremely useful for one of two things: base assaults and base defense. You stick a few Maxes in your base defense and you can get a very efficient kill-to-death ratio, useful for trying to stop people from taking over your stuff. You can also use them to rapidly assault an area. The so-called Max Crash was a tactic in Planetside 1 where a large group of Maxes would engage run, sprint across from a tower, because you couldn't spawn these things in AMS that were too advanced, and then you would be able to simply blast your way through the back door and hopefully, without taking too many casualties, get inside and clear out the defenders, allowing your squishier guys to come in behind you and secure the area. I've switched over to a new Conglomerate Max here. It doesn't really make a huge amount of difference because I've picked a similar weapon loadout. You'll notice this new Conglomerate Max actually has a burster anti-air cannon. Yes, once again, that may be possible, or it may not. They haven't determined which weapons will be specific for the faction maxes yet, and which ones will be in the general so-called common weapon pool that can be used by all three factions. But they have stressed that there will be faction-specific weapons. The new Conglomerate Max in Planetside 1 used to use a heavy scatter cannon, which was a large shotgun, or alternatively tracking missiles for AA and dumbfire rockets for anti-vehicle. Now, this is the Vanu Max. All of the animations are broken, by the way. So, yes, it does actually look like a giant enemy crab at the moment. That's the way that it walks. I find it kind of comical. But I'm just going to show you the kind of weapons you can expect to get on this thing anyway. That is a Quasar anti-infantry beam rifle on the left hand, and if I recall correctly, that is a Comet anti-vehicle mortar on the right hand. In the original Planetside, these guys were the only ones with a jump jet ability. There's now an entire class that has jump packs, although I would expect to also see perhaps a max variant with that as well. We'll have to see, because that ability was by far the best out of the three max abilities. There's arguably slightly imbalanced there. Let's switch back to Terran here. I'll give you another look at the loadouts that you can see. Let's switch out, and we're going to get a couple of bursters, because I see an aircraft over there. And I would love to shoot it down. I think that can be arranged. Sometime later, we switch over to the night environment there, and this is, of course, the Max that you saw in the Night Ops footage. A dual burster Max, still a little bit twitchy, animation problems and so on and so forth in the Studio Alpha. This is one of the most effective ways, at least it would be, if the AoE damage wasn't broken in the alpha at the moment, for bringing down aircraft. Maxes had a lot of firepower, they were highly specialized. The Burster Max for the Terran Republic was particularly effective because it was the only one of the three anti-air Max that didn't give the aircraft a lock-on warning, because of course it is dumbfire flak. So that's rather handy. Admittedly, it also took a hell of a lot more skill to bring down an enemy plane. Now, there's some interesting balance concerns with the jump pads that I've shown you. You can still use these things with an actual Max, and arguably that gives them just a little bit too much mobility. The studio have said they're still thinking about whether or not they want to allow a Max to do that, because otherwise Maxes would have too much flexibility, and one of their main disadvantages would be removed by the addition of this jump pad mechanic. We shall see how that ends up turning out. But the Max is a very specialized role. A lot of people will enjoy it. I recall that one of the first things that people used to do when they signed up to Planetside was more often than not they would cert straight into the Max. You could either cert into the AA Max, the AV, the anti-infantry, or you could cert into all three, Unimax as it was called, which would allow you access to all three of these things. Now, they did have a cooldown on them. Once you'd spawned one, I think it was about 5 minutes until you could spawn that one again. So if you died pretty quickly, you couldn't get back into your Max suit. In this case, those differences kind of don't apply because you can customize your Maxes one way or the other. But I'm rather curious as to whether or not they will limit the deployment of Maxes in some other way, perhaps requiring a particular facility with some kind of technology, or having a cooldown, or making it cost resources like a vehicle, because it is essentially a man tank. We don't really know at this stage. What I do know is that Maxes are looking pretty damn awesome in this version of the game thus far. I used to enjoy using a Max in Planetside 1 quite a lot. And hey, flamethrowers. Dual flamethrowers. My name's been Total Biscuit, taking a look at the very basic implementation of Maxes. I'll see you next time.